As part of a generation that has grown up believing that everything is moldable, millennials set the bar unrealistically high for themselves based on expectations of others and society. They have to do everything and everything has to be done now, because that's just how it's done. Welcome, my name is Gaby Reisger. I'm an organizational consultant at Human Capital Care. And today I'm going to talk about millennials. Maybe you are a millennial yourself, or maybe you are just watching because you have to work with millennials a lot and you just want to understand them better and see how you can improve their well-being. Improve their well-being, well, that is necessary because research has shown that about 60% of the millennials, so workers between the ages of 18 and 38, experience high levels of stress. And among youngsters between 18 and 25, this percentage is even higher, 67%. So those numbers are shockingly high. And the purpose of this webinar today is to actually understand and gain insight on where this stress comes from and how to deal with it. So let's start. Where does this stress come from? Well, when you look at the job demands resources model, a very much investigated model in science, we know that there are two processes that people go through when they're at work. First of all, we have the upper process, the motivational process, which means that we gain a lot of energy from our daily jobs because we experience a lot of job resources or personal resources. For instance, having nice co-workers to work with who are really nice to you and you can laugh with them, but also because you are actually really influenced by your co-workers to actually do that, to do your job really well. The other resources may be because you have a lot of autonomy at work, you feel really motivated, and when you are motivated, you often feel really good about yourself and your well-being is good as well. So that motivational process causes you to actually do your job well. Your job performance is also increasingly gaining from your motivation. On the other hand, we have the exhaustion process, the lower part of the model. When we experience a lot of job demands that cost us a lot of energy, then we also experience a lot of strain or stress, which is okay, but too much strain and stress actually causes us to not perform as well as we would like to. And in the end, this can actually cause us to become ill. Now, millennials are actually really good at starting at that motivational process. By nature, they are, or you are actually quite curious and you just like to see how you can do your job the best way you can. You're motivated and you do your job really well. So, ideal workers for most employers. However, when there are setbacks, and unfortunately we all have to deal with setbacks, millennials are often intrigued to actually focus too much on the exhaustion process, on things that they cannot influence. Why? Well, they have learned that everything is moldable in life. And when that's not always realistic, that can cost them actually a lot of energy. So that's their pitfall, to focus too much on the lower side of the model. They get exhausted and that can actually make them become ill. Of course, that's not what we want and that's not what you want, I hope. So how do you deal with this as a millennial? You would like to focus on the motivational process. I think it's easiest to actually start to see where your influence actually is. So when you have a day that's really frustrating, then think of that day and think of why it's so frustrating for you. Is it because things have happened that are out of your influence, or are those things actually things you need to learn and you can actually learn and influence? So looking at this circle of influence, you can see and plot those things that frustrate you or cost you energy and often are job demands at work. And you can plot them in this circle to see where's my influence when it comes down to those demands. Once you know where the influence is, you can see what to do with them. So how do you approach this? First of all, it's good for you to see, okay, so what are my resources, job resources and personal resources? And on the other hand, what are my stressors? What are those things at work that cost me a lot of energy? Then plot them in the circle of influence. Do you have a lot of influence over them, or is it completely out of your hands? Once you know that, you can see where to focus on. So who and what do you need if it's something you can influence? And how are you going to do that? But more importantly, if it's something that you cannot influence, then can you accept it? So choose another strategy to deal with your frustration so it won't become such a stressor that your stress level increases. Or can you actually do other things, have other options, other choices to not deal with these stressors? And then in the end, it should be much clearer to you that once you feel frustrated, that it's actually a signal for you to see, okay, am I focusing on the right things, or should I be focusing more on those things that I can influence and that actually give me much more energy again at work? So how do you do this? Well, of course, we have a tool for you. For instance, the battery checklist. This is just a tool for you to see, okay, let me think of what are of those stressors and resources at work. What are they for me? And how important are they for me? So not only do you write them down, but you also give them a number, or you rate them from most important to least important. Once you've gained insights in your battery, it's easier for you to use those in the circle of influence and see whether you have enough of your resources that can recharge you or charge you, and that your stressors aren't becoming too much for you to handle. So, of course, we are talking about that battery and seeing how you can charge yourself. And when we look at those energy resources, we often notice that people, and you as a millennial as well, actually charge on 4 different pillars in life, not just at work, but in life. And those pillars are these ones: mental, emotional, physical, and meaningfulness. So, just to give you an example of this, because I already hear you asking me, what do you mean? Let's meet Eric. Eric here is really hardworking. He's about 25 years old, and he loves his job. He loves his job, and he is very active, both at work, but also beside work. So when he's off, he goes home, he has a dog, he takes long walks with them. He also likes to go to the gym, and he does everything for the full 100%. So when you look at Eric, you might think that Eric has it all. He is charged on all those 4 pillars. He has a good job where he's challenged. He is actually really active, so he's fit and healthy. And emotionally, he has a dog, so probably that goes really well as well. Still, as you can see here, Eric is not really the happiest person you've probably ever seen in your life. How does that work then? Well, even though Eric may have filled a couple of these pillars, Eric does not really focus on 2 of them, especially meaningfulness. So what's really important for you in life, and where do you want to focus on instead of trying to do everything 100%? But also emotional, because he's working so hard. He goes to the gym a lot, and mainly has time with his dog. he is not really in connection to friends and a social life. So even though a couple of his pillars are filled, not all of them are as filled as much as you would like to see. So when you filled in your own battery checklist, see if those energy resources that are most important to you also cover all of the 4 pillars that are important, and especially meaningfulness. We know that millennials need that pillar really filled to actually feel energized and happy, both at work and when they're off from work. Now, the other thing I hear you say is you talk a lot about resources and mainly about job resources, but you also talked about personal resources when you mentioned the job demands resources model. That model indeed mentioned personal resources. And when we look at millennials, we see that millennials often have trouble actually, feeling really confident about themselves, but also they have a couple of characteristics that actually make them more vulnerable when it comes to stress. And you can think of characteristics such as perfectionism. That's actually one of the most important we see in millennials. And that actually challenges them to not feel overloaded with work and with stress. So how do you know what your challenges are when it comes to those personal resources? Well, here is the quadrant of Hoffman, the core quadrant. And you can use that quadrant to actually see, so where are my challenges when it comes down to my characteristics as a millennial? And where you have to start is to see what your qualities actually are. You can probably think of them yourself, but you can also ask people in your surroundings who know you really well and can help you with deciding what those core qualities of you as a millennial actually are. And once you know those core qualities, it's really important to see, okay, if those are my core qualities, then what is my biggest challenge? And beside that biggest challenge, what is my allergy? But also, what's my pitfall? And often when it comes down to those core qualities, we relate them straight to our pitfall. For instance, Kim here is this lovely millennial, but she's really a perfectionist. She loves to do her job really well, and she loves to do everything, or she wants to do everything at 100%. And her 100% often means for others that it's 110 or 120%. But to Kim, she always needs to perform at that level. And that's a really nice quality. But your challenge, or Kim's challenge, is it's sometimes necessary to let go, to be able to relax again and make sure that your stress level is not as high as it is at that moment. So the pitfall of perfectionism for Kim is that she is going to take everything and she's going to do everything on her own, making it as perfect as possible, spending the hours that are necessary according to her to make it as perfect as possible. So she works long hours and she has little time left to actually relax with friends and do some nice things for herself. She cannot release her stress anymore, so her stress levels increase and increase day by day. Now, there's a coworker who she actually cannot stand. Her biggest allergy is that person at work who can actually let go and even comes across as if he or she doesn't even care about the job at all. But that person is actually the person that Kim can learn from. That nonchalant, indifferent coworker has the key to relax and let things go. So Kim knows now, I'm a perfectionist. My biggest pitfall is actually being overcritical, doing everything too good actually. And my challenge is to let go. So let me talk to my coworker, who is actually my allergy, and let me ask how he or she makes sure that that they can let the work at that moment go when it's time to relax a little bit again. Now, this is just an example of perfectionism, but you as a millennial have a lot of core qualities. And use this quadrant to see what are my core qualities and where are my pitfalls for stress when it comes down to those core qualities. Of course, we help you with that. So you can read the following questions. Am I overcompensating for what I'm doing when I look at my core qualities? And is it also something I'm responsible for or not? So every time you see or you know this is my core quality and this is what where my pitfall is, ask yourself these questions to see if you can actually deal with becoming less perfectionistic in this case, or one of your other core qualities. Now, when it comes to working on those core qualities or actually preventing from getting into those pitfalls, one of the hardest things is preventing a relapse in behavior. So, for instance, when you're perfectionistic, it's often seen that people, and especially millennials, relapse in that behavior, being overly critical and taking on all the work themselves. Why you say, well, even though you work on it, your surroundings is not used to you actually setting some boundaries and letting some things go, and maybe even delegating some of the job. So perseverance is one of the key words when it comes to working on your core qualities and challenging yourself in having those core qualities as qualities instead of those pitfalls. So even though your surroundings does not work with you, try to persevere and not relapse in the behavior. When it's hard, find someone to talk to about that and see if someone can maybe coach you in how to make sure that you do not relapse in the behavior. One of the things, or one of the people in your surroundings is, for instance, your manager. Talk to them about it if you feel that they are not completely supporting you in persevering in having your core quality, preventing them from becoming your greatest pitfalls. So keep on going and have faith in yourself. Now, I've talked about many things in a really short period of time, actually. And I've given you a lot of information, having the purpose to gain some insights for you on where your stress comes from and how to deal with that on several levels, basically. Keep in mind that organizations actually value really highly as a millennial, because you have that curiosity and the right attitude to help them gain insights and actually perform well on the job. Of course, there are some challenges, and one of those things is not to focus too much on the exhaustion process, on things that you cannot influence and that cost you a lot of energy. Focus on things that actually give you energy and make sure that you take your surroundings with you in that. Then see if all your pillars are filled, not just physically, not just mentally, but also emotionally and meaningfully. Of course, your core qualities are really important to help you with that. Know who you are, know where your pitfalls are, and where your greatest challenges are for you to actually flourish in what you do and who you are. Then lastly but not leastly, I'm not sure if that's a real English word, but we have given you some tools. First of all, the battery checklist, and second of all, the core quality quadrant of Hoffman. There are some questions with that as well to help you use those tools for yourself and to gain insight on exactly where your resources and where your stressors are when it comes to your work and daily life. I thank you very much for your attention, and hopefully we've helped you a little bit with a step in the right direction and preventing yourself from becoming too stressed. You will receive this presentation, of course, as well. And do you want or need further information, then go to our website. Other than that, I hope to see you in the future for maybe another webinar or maybe in real life if it comes to working and working healthy. Thank you so much and see you next time.